Okay, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Live from the Sword Coast podcast. My name is Kevin Madison, and this is entry number, forgive me, I'm unpacking something as I'm trying to record this. This is entry 25 in my series of videos answering the questions posed during RPG A Day for 2017. This is a series, it's the first time you're watching one of these. This is a series of videos where we answer a different question every day for the month of August 2017 to do with role-playing games and our experience with them and favorites and whatever. Today's question, actually I should say, so for if you have been watching those or watching them at the time you're watching, I said that for today I was going to go with questions. Because I didn't think that I had much to say about the existing questions for the last like 9 or 10 days. But actually, I've changed my mind on that. So the question for today, for day 25, is what is the best way to thank your GM? And actually, you know what? I thought of I thought about this initially. My inclination was to say, talk about crass commercial, thanks and whatnot, books and whatever. But I mean, like, jokes aside, I do think I have a serious answer for this. And so gaming is a team sport. Like, whether you consider it a sport or not is another thing, but it's a team exercise. This isn't something we do in a vacuum. It's something that requires everyone, like the players and the DM, and everyone is working together to have a good time. It's not like some other forms of entertainment where it's really a singular activity. This is something where we're all in this together, and the fun that comes from this comes from everyone cooperating to a certain degree or another. I don't want to talk about problem players necessarily, because that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about just is, what ways you can thank as a player. How can you thank your DM in a way that, setting aside, gifts and whatever else, which is going to be individual. And I think the answer that I've come up with is the best way that you can thank your DM, game like you're a DM. And there's a couple of things specific to that I think are important. For one, it's to recognize that everyone is working together on this, and what that means is having some and fun is obviously important as a player. You should also be considering everyone else's fun to make the game more fun for other people as well. And that's not, if you're really stretching, what am I doing to make the game fun for the DM, which is always appreciated. But what are you doing to make the game more fun for everyone? And that can be little things like, for more reluctant players or more reserved players, trying to help them come out of their shell a little bit, or trying to feed them some story ideas or things like that. For people who are less tactical minded, to maybe provide some suggestions on how to use certain of their abilities. Or for those who are just struggling to kind of come to grips with their characters, giving them an opportunity to role play with your character. Role play and ask some questions if the DM's not probing them. This is some very, very simple things too. Be cognizant that everyone's time at the table is limited. So if you are late to the game, obviously people can start without you. That's not necessarily a problem, but there's going to be a point where you're going to need to be caught up. And depending on the nature of the session, if it's you're playing without any breaks, then people are going to have to spend time getting you caught up again. Showing up at the table unprepared is also a problem. That is impacting on everyone else's fun, because they're having to spend less time playing the game and more time waiting for you to figure it out before you came to the table. The DM is going to be coming prepared to play, so you should be thinking to be prepared on your end as well. If you foresee, another thing with that too is the DM's job is to move the game along at a good pace and to control, make sure that scenes don't lose momentum, whether those be combat scenes or otherwise. So think about, pay attention to when other people are doing things. And pay attention to the whole game, I guess. That's the thing that DMs do. And I think when I've played with players who are more often DMs than players, that's what I see is I see players paying attention to the game a lot more closely. As a DM, you have to pay attention to everything that's happening. You're balancing everything else that's going on. You can't just tune out. So as a player, it's really important that, and it's not necessarily important. I mean, it's not critical. Everyone's table is different, but I think that it's a real benefit if you have been paying attention and you can help people out, and or so you can say what you're going to do when your turn comes and be ready to go with what's happened, and that means responding to what has just happened on the previous person's turn as well. If suddenly if you had something in mind you wanted to do, changed, then you've hopefully got some other idea how to some contingency as to what you want to do. Paying attention during the whole game as well also means that you have more opportunities to actually players to work on some teamwork, synergy between your different characters, and that's really important. There are different games emphasize this mechanically to different degrees, but there are always benefits that come from working as a team. Simple as focusing fire on an enemy to take down one enemy at a time, or to take down a really powerful enemy, or coordinating some kind of social scene, or non-combat scene, or an infiltration. Things that are really important that pay attention during planning stages to make sure that you're not offering a suggestion that someone just rejected a half hour ago. So that I find is a way you can thank your DM. Every DM, just like every person, right, is going to have certain peccadillos that just they irritate them, and that's something that I hate. Like, I hate having to repeat myself. I hate having to repeat. If someone has the opportunity to say learn some information or have something explained to them, but they just weren't paying attention, and I have to do that again, it's a thing that just irritates me. It's a personal quirk, but it just drives me fucking crazy. And because it says to me that their time is not as valuable as my time, that they can feel free to waste other, and to be honest, everyone else at the tables too. Like, that is a minor thing, and I recognize that's a personal issue, and it doesn't necessarily impact on any given table. But for me, it's one of the things that drives me nuts. And maybe that's the thing to mention as well, is if DMs are all people too, and they're going to have their own quirks and the things that irritate them, or things that they get their goat, or things that they've got shortcomings on too, right? Like, if you've got a DM who you feel is maybe getting lost in the forest for the trees, one of the ways you can thank your DM, I guess, this isn't really thanking them, but because it's helping them out of, if they get caught in a situation. Let's say a DM gets caught up in a social interaction with a character, with a PC, and there ends up being more personality of the DM and the player that gets involved in that, and argument goes between two characters in the game end up going sideways on account of just heated tensions between a DM and a player. This I see happen more often in long-term friends. Like, if you've got friends who you've been with forever, I see this happen sometimes with my oldest friends, where we will just get into something. If you say to the DM, on at a maybe not necessarily in the moment, but in a moment afterwards, say, like, look, do you feel that maybe that can be helpful sometimes, because you can even hit the rewind button and say, look, all right, listen, we're getting caught up in the moment here. Let's dial us back. I think that it would handle differently, particularly if a DM is like, if you're playing a stupid character or an easily bamboozled character, and someone pisses you off, sometimes you may play that character as more intelligent than they intended and have more or counter arguments than they intended. And that's a helpful way that sometimes I think players can kind of, like, especially if players aren't involved with that interaction, to say, like, guys, this way, are we sure this is the way it's going to go? And I use that as one example, but that's for any kind of thing. Like, if a DM says that it'll take you 4 days to travel 24 miles, rather than making a big issue, say, like, well, hold on, does that number sound right? Or is there some, are we traveling through mountain peaks for this entire length of travel, or is there some other thing who like to improv, or are forced off script? DMs can be, can be hit by this quite badly too. In particular, if that DM has prepped a pre-generated adventure. I had an experience with someone who had DM'd before, had plenty of experience as a player, but the life in a DM's chair is very different because you are constantly having people change the scenery is suddenly changing all the time because players are choosing to do things that you did not intend. And if this particular DM had prepped one of Pathfinder's adventure paths, he'd done a terrific job of prepping it, running it. He had a good knowledge of all the characters. He had the stats at hand and whatever else. But we, of course, as players are wont to do, we decided to do something completely. And he had a real hard time, struggling to come up with what we were going to do. So what I suggested is I said, like, you know what? Do you want to take, like, why don't we take our 10-minute coffee break right now? And then, you can maybe consider what you want to do to respond to what we're proposing. And we did that. And I think we might have actually taken a longer break to order food and stuff like that, which gave the DM a chance to think it over, to figure out what he wanted to do. And then we got back and he nailed it. He ran a terrific session that responded to what we had been planning. And it's great. Another thing, I guess, is in the whole thinking like a DM perspective or vein, I guess, is to know the rules. If you've made an effort, now you don't need to know everything. You certainly don't need to know every ins and outs, particularly with really complex games. Like if you're running or playing, I should say, a game of Shadowrun, you do not need to know, and you're playing a Street Samurai. You're playing a guy who shoots people, and that's really it. You don't need to know the decking rules. You don't need to know the magic rules. You don't need to know the rigging rules. You don't need to know, like, shit that isn't going to come up on a regular basis with your character. You don't need to know. You should know recoil. You should know how many rounds are in your clip of each of your weapons. You should know what your modifiers are based on what your cyberware does. The things that are important at the table, you should know. And it's important to actually know them, not just have a brief understanding. I saw has a really funny video talking about players half reading rules, where they'll read through to 2 sentences into a paragraph and decide that's what the thing does, when the important stuff is in the last 2 paragraphs. I find it funny because, like, that has happened all the time. It happens all the time in a lot of the games that I run, where my answer to questions from players are like, well, can I do this? Well, what is to say? Well, what does it say? Most of our games on Roll20, but even before that, we used to, when I was managing everyone's character sheets, I would always have full rules for abilities, feats, stuff like that. Like any kind of special feature, full rules would be transcribed from the rulebook onto the character sheet, so that at a glance, they had everything they needed to know. And everyone can make mistakes, but you are doing your DM a world of good to not have to be monitoring your the rules of how your different abilities work. And I guess there's a school of thought that say, like, well, who cares? Like, really, it's, as long as everyone's having fun and blah blah blah, and that's fine. But what whatever. I still want to know what the rule is before I decide to break it. I don't want to, I don't want to be running the game in ignorance. I want to be able to know what it says before I can say, well, okay, we'll break it here for whatever reason. So that's something that would be really helpful, is knowing, if you know the rules, that is a huge way of thanking your DM. And I guess the final way is, again, to think like a DM. A DM is trying to run a game for a group of people who are playing characters. So the decisions that you make in terms of what characters you are bringing to the table and how you are playing them is going to have a significant impact on how easy the game is for the DM to run. I don't mean to suggest that everyone needs to be, all happy and get along or all be members of the same family or some nonsense like that. That you don't want to make, there's a lot of stuff that the DM is doing to manage the campaign, to keep things going and to think of things on the fly as things emerge in the course of play. You don't want another one of those things to be trying to come up with reasons for why your character should give a shit about the game. The DM's done a good, and I don't mean to say that you need to build a train that's going to run on the railroads that the DM has set up in their adventure. But what you should be doing is being cognizant of the fact that, like, look, there's got to be some way of me. I'm thinking of actually, there's some great advice in the Feng Shui 2 game where they talk about the buy-in. And in that game, they actually put the onus on the players. They say, well, why do you care? This is what's happening. Why do you care about this? I'm not sure I would necessarily go that far, because you don't. I don't think you need to. In that game, it's terrific. I think it's great because there are total weirdo groups of characters. You could have a samurai Ronin archer from the 17th century, and a cyborg gorilla, and a modern day cop, and a from the dawn of the Chinese Empire, all together in the same group. That's going to be a weird to try and find up some excuse for group cohesion. I understand the buy-in there, but for most other games where there is sort of a built-in structure for why the characters are together and what's going to set them out on their adventures, think of like a DM and as to why your character is going to buy into whatever stuff that the group is undertaking. I understand that there is a great degree of importance on playing your characters, the way you've envisioned them, and being true to the characters and role playing them correctly and stuff like that. And that can generate some good, fun intra-party. Sometimes that will, unfortunately, it's because of the way circumstances go, it will put you in a position where a player has to play their character disruptive to the group just because of the way things played out, and it would be unbelievable to have the character act in a different way. But that is a very, very situational thing. That is an emergent thing that I think is unforeseen and then suddenly comes up. What I think is that you want to make sure you're coming up with ideas for why your character works good in a group, not what is going to be cool for him on his own. An example of this is in my long-term Iron Kingdoms campaign, which was run using the Iron Kingdoms role-playing game. Almost every character in that was sort of a character adrift at the start of the campaign. Everyone has sort of lost their way, and this was not by intention. I didn't tell everyone to make the character that way. It just worked out that way. Everyone sort of didn't have a home, was had really tragic backstories, but when in the course of the campaign, it was a sandboxy type thing. The characters ended up becoming effectively sheriffs in this one duchy, and they owned this tavern and inn. And that became a focal point. That suddenly became the thing that all those lost souls, it brought them all together, gave them purpose, and they really, started making long-term plans as to what they were going to do there. All of them except for one. One player was playing a character who, and I don't fault him for this, it was an interesting character and there was enough time for him to be there for the time being, but this character had a shelf life as to why he was going to be there. He was playing a character who was an Iosan, which is like a high elf in the Iron Kingdoms, and he was part of a group called the Seekers. And the Seekers, what they do is they go out and they try and find information about the about the Elven or the Iosan past, to try and save their future, because they were in that setting, they are a dying race. Their gods were trapped on the prime material plane for thousands of years, and then progressively fell asleep. They just lost their power and whatever. And in addition, elven souls started not reincarnating. So they were elves that were born that were soulless. So there's a really important. The Seekers were trying to find some solution for this, some hint from the past as to how they could fix this. So they have a really, really critical role. But what that meant is that this character, who would live longer than what the other players would, who was with them because there was something going on in that duchy that seemed to suggest that there were Iosans involved at some point, distant in the past. So he had a great reason for being there, worked really well with the character, with the other players, but long term, that character was not going to be there. That was sort of a conflict. And not even a conflict, just a divergence of views. So that character was when that storyline resolved, unless I came up with some other cockamamie reason for him being there, it made no sense for him, as much as he may like his friends. Obviously, his duty was going to be to his dying people and to this purpose that he had, dedicated his life to. So that, but I guess, that I don't use as an example of disruptive gameplay. I think that's really good. That's thinking like a DM, and that player was aware that there was a point where he wasn't going to be playing that character anymore. It was more important to him to play that character authentically and collaboratively with everyone else. And then if he was going to go, he was going to go off on his own. He was going to make a new character, and then he'd have some new person who was going to get involved with the rest of the Silver Swords, which the mercenary group called themselves, or the players called themselves. So I guess that's my advice, is that I think the best way that you can thank your DM or GM, as the question actually goes, is to think like a DM when you are coming to the table. The DMs will be very, very pleased with you. They will be anything that helps make our jobs easier or gives us more fodder to work with is great stuff. It is stuff that we greatly, greatly appreciate. To be honest, I mean, it's for most DMs, this is their favorite hobby anyway. So if you are helping them have more fun and have an easier job at their favorite hobby, that is a better thanks than any amount of books or, gifts or whatever other bullshit or pizza that may be, that you may come up with. That other stuff doesn't hurt either. I have my players in my Star Wars campaign last 2 years for my birthday have got me these beautiful little, not little, they're quite big, Star Wars ships, like from the miniature game. And that was such a thoughtful and awesome gift. That was, I thoroughly appreciate my players for that. That was very thoughtful. But the players who come, and actually I'm very, very fortunate. My players are terrific. The guys who I usually play with are terrific in the sense that they, for the most part, are thinking that way. They're thinking, they're recognizing it's a team sport. They're not doing things that are necessarily disruptive, but they're also being true to their characters too. They're giving me good story stuff to play with and good role-playing moments for me to sink my teeth into to help bring those other players who are less role-playing inclined out of their shell. So that's, I think, my answer to that question. If you asked me last night, I didn't think I'd have anything meaningful to say about that, but I think, yeah, thinking about it, that's what I think. That's, I think, the best way that you can thank your GM. So tomorrow's question is, which RPG provides the most useful resources? And that is, I think actually I may answer that one too, because there's quite a few games over the years that have had really phenomenal resources that I have greatly enjoyed. And I'd be happy to talk about those. So anyway, I have a game to prepare for tonight. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and do that. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding this video or any of the other things I talked about in the course of this month, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the section below, and I will endeavor to get back to you as in a timely fashion. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow.